I never thought I'd say this, but the night I heard the sound of a gun cocking outside my own front porch, my world shattered. The metallic click cut through the cricket's song, sharp and final, like the sound of death itself arriving uninvited. And when I saw that weapon aimed at my little girl's chest held by a woman we all knew too well, something inside me break. My daughter's lips trembled, her eyes wide with terror, and I swear time stopped. I wanted to scream, to move, to throw myself in front of her. But my training as a police officer forced me into a stillness that felt like suffocation. Karen, our neighbor, the so-called queen of the HOA, was gripping that gun like she'd been waiting her whole life to pull it. And all I could think in that frozen second was, does she even know who I am? Does she know I'm the police chief of this entire county? But maybe I should start earlier, because this wasn't random. No, this moment was years in the making. See, my family had always been my anchor. My wife, Emily, and I worked hard for the life we built. Our home wasn't extravagant. It was a 2-story ranch-style house with a porch swing and white siding, but it was ours. We raised our kids there. We built memories in those walls. My daughter Lily was 16, full of life, always humming around the house, sketching in her notebook, or practicing her guitar. My son Mason, younger by 2 years, had that spark-toothed kind of kid who could charm anyone with a smile. They were my whole world. And Emily, she kept us grounded. She had a way of calming storms just by touching my arm. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. And honestly, for a while, it felt like we were. But cracks started to show the day Karen became HOA president. Karen moved into our neighborhood 5 years ago, and from day one, she decided this place belonged to her. She had a way of twisting rules, of pushing boundaries, of making you feel small. At first, we tried to laugh it off. Her endless complaints about our unapproved porch plants, the way she'd measure our trash cans to make sure they were the right distance from the curb. It all seemed like some sick hobby for her. But then it started getting personal. It was Lily she seemed to hate most. I never understood why. Maybe it was the way my daughter stood her ground, even as a teenager. Karen hated being challenged, and Lily, well, she wasn't afraid to call things as she saw them. The first time Karen screamed at her was over chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Lily had drawn flowers, suns, and a rainbow. Childish, innocent joy. But Karen stormed over, red-faced, shouting about community appearance and how chalk devalued property. I remember Emily stepping between them, her hands shaking as she said, "She's just a kid." But Karen leaned down, inches from my daughter's face, and hissed, "Respect rules, or pay for it." That night, when I tucked Lily in, I could still see the shadow of fear in her eyes, and I swore to myself I'd protect her. But protection isn't always easy when the enemy lives right across the street. The problem with being police chief is that people either respect you or resent you. Karen fell in the second camp. She didn't like that she couldn't intimidate me the way she did the rest of the neighborhood. She'd smile at me with that tight plastic grin whenever I pulled into the driveway. But her eyes, cold and calculating, told the real story. And over time, her obsession with control bled into something darker. I started noticing small things. Lily's bike tires slashed. Mason's basketball hoop knocked over in the middle of the night. Notes shoved under our door saying things like, "Some families don't belong here." My officers told me to install cameras, file reports, gather evidence. And I did. But Karen was careful, slippery like oil. Nothing ever caught her directly. Still, I never imagined it would escalate to this. To her standing on my porch, pointing a gun at my daughter. The irony. That day had started so normal. I grilled burgers on the deck while Lily played guitar inside. Mason ran through the sprinkler with his friends, laughter spilling across the yard. Emily set the table, her hair catching the golden light. For a moment, it felt like the universe had pressed pause, letting us breathe in the simplicity of family. But normal never lasts when you live under Karens. Shadow, it was around sunset when Lily said she wanted to walk to the park just a few blocks down. Emily hesitated, reminding her to be careful, but I smiled and said, "She'll be fine. It's our neighborhood." I regret those words now, because 15 minutes later, I heard shouting outside. I rushed to the porch, and that's when I saw the gun, the trembling hands. My daughter frozen like a deer in headlights, and Karen's voice, shrill and sharp, cut through the night. "You think you can disrespect me? You think rules don't matter?" My training screamed at me to act. My instincts screamed louder. Protect my child. But one thought burned above all the noise. If I make one wrong move, my daughter dies. And then Karen's finger tightened on the trigger. People think wars begin with a single shot. But in truth, they start much earlier with whispers, grudges, and tiny wounds that never heal. By the time Karen aimed that gun at my daughter, the ground beneath us had been eroding for years. And part of me hates to admit this. Not all of it was Karen's fault. Some of it began inside my own family. Let me explain. I grew up in a home where secrets festered. My father was a deputy, strict and unforgiving, and my mother always looked the other way. I swore I'd never raise my kids like that. I wanted openness, fairness, but life has a cruel way of repeating itself. No matter how hard you fight it, take Lily and Mason. I love them both, but I'd be lying if I said I treated them the same. Lily, being the firstborn, always carried the weight of my expectations. Straight A's, perfect behavior, piano lessons. Softball piled on her shoulders because I wanted her to have every opportunity. Mason, though, he got away with more. Maybe because he reminded me of myself as a boy, reckless, funny, unafraid. I laughed when he messed up, while Lily's mistakes earned long lectures. Emily saw it too. She'd sometimes whisper at night, "You're too hard on her, John." I'd brush it off, promising to ease up. But did I really? Looking back, maybe I planted the very seed Karen watered with her poison, because Karen noticed things. She studied people like predators study prey. She saw the cracks between us and widened them. She singled Lily out. Always Lily, never Mason. Once, she told my daughter, "Your brother's the golden child, isn't he? Bet Daddy loves him more." I didn't hear it myself, but Lily came home crying. Her notebook pages ripped where she had scribbled too hard in anger. Another time, Karen accidentally told Emily during a neighborhood barbecue that she saw Lily with older boys at the park. It wasn't true my daughter was sitting under a tree, sketching alone, but Karen planted the doubt. And suddenly, Emily and I were arguing in the kitchen, voices low but sharp. Lily overheard, of course. She always did. Secrets, suspicions. The cracks deepened. And then there were the nights. God, I remember one in particular. A storm had rolled in, rattling the windows, thunder shaking the house. Lily was about 13. She came into our room, pale, clutching her sketchbook. She whispered that she saw someone standing outside her window, staring in. I jumped up, grabbed my service weapon, and tore through the yard with a flashlight. Nothing, just rain slapping the pavement. But the next morning, we found muddy footprints under her window. Smaller than mine, larger than Mason's. They led straight back to the sidewalk, where Karen's house sat like a sentinel across the street. Emily begged me to confront her, but without proof, what could I do? Call in a patrol unit to investigate the HOA president for trespassing. The same woman who knew every technical violation in the neighborhood bylaws. She would have twisted it into harassment, into me abusing my badge, so I stayed quiet. And that silence weighed on Lily like a stone. Our family dinners grew tense. Mason would talk about basketball tryouts. Emily would ask about my cases at work, and Lily. She would just push peas around her plate, her eyes downcast. When I tried to draw her out, she'd say, "Doesn't matter. Dad, you'll just tell me to do better." Those words cut sharper than any blade. Still, Karen wasn't satisfied with whispers and mind games. No, she escalated. One Sunday morning, we found our mailbox smashed to pieces. The wood splintered like bones, the flag bent. Inside, tucked between shredded envelopes, was a note. "Control your daughter, or I will." My blood ran cold. I wanted to storm across the street right then, badge shining, gun holstered, ready to end it. But Emily grabbed my hand, tears brimming. "If you go," she twisted, "she'll make you the villain." So we documented it. Photos, timestamps, reports logged quietly into the system. Evidence piling up like tinder, waiting for a match. And then came the school incident. Lily was in 9th grade when she got detention for disrupting class. I didn't believe it. She wasn't a troublemaker. But when I asked what happened, she mumbled, "Karen showed up." My heart sank. Karen had volunteered as some kind of community liaison at the school, and that day she'd sat in on Lily's art class. According to Lily, she criticized her drawing, called it dark, disturbing, not community-friendly, and when Lily snapped back, she was punished. I wanted to rip Karen's name off the volunteer list with my bare hands. Instead, I went home, held Lily, and told her, "None of this is your fault." But she didn't believe me. Not fully. The hardest part. Mason began noticing too. One night, while tossing a basketball in the driveway, he muttered, "Why does she hate Lily so much?" He was just 14, but his voice held confusion and anger. I had no answer for him. Because deep down, I wondered the same thing. Was it jealousy, power, or something even darker? That question haunted me, and it became the turning point. Because once you start asking why someone like Karen fixates on a child, your child, you'll realize the danger isn't just petty. It's lethal. But I didn't know how close we were to the edge until the night I came home to find Lily standing in the kitchen. Her hands shaking, her shirt stained with something dark. My heart slammed against my ribs as I rushed to her, thinking blood. It wasn't blood. It was paint splattered across her from head to toe. Red, sticky, dripping. Her sketchbook ruined, pages glued together. She whispered, "She did it. Karen did this." She waited for me outside the park and poured it all over me. I froze. My daughter, humiliated, trembling, her art destroyed, and all I could think was, if this is what she does with paint, what happens when she reaches for something deadlier? The night Lily came home dripping in red paint was the moment I knew Karen had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. But even then, I didn't realize just how close we were to disaster. Looking back now, every sound, every shadow, every word Karen spoke in those weeks felt like a countdown to something. Explosive, I tried to handle it the right way through channels, through procedure. I logged the incident, photographed Lily's ruined sketchbook, even collected the shirt she'd been wearing as evidence. But without a witness, without a camera catching Karen in the act, it was just another entry in a growing stack of harassment complaints. And Karen knew it. That's what made her so dangerous. She believed she was untouchable. Meanwhile, the tension at home was thick enough to choke on. Emily tiptoed around every conversation. Mason grew angrier by the day. And Lily? She retreated further into herself. I'd find her in her room with the curtains drawn, sketching darker and darker images, shadows with hollow eyes, figures with outstretched hands. When I asked about them, she'd shrug and say, "It's just how I feel. I wanted to fix it." I wanted to promise her safety. But I also knew promises meant nothing if I couldn't back them up. And deep down, I feared I couldn't. It was late spring when the escalation hit its stride. The grass was freshly cut. The air smelled of honeysuckle, and for a brief moment, our block almost looked like a postcard. But then Karen struck again. We'd left Lily's guitar case propped on the porch after she practiced. When she went out to grab it the next morning, it was gone. Vanished. We searched the yard, the street, even the garbage bins. Nothing. Days later, the case reappeared, dumped on the sidewalk, string snapped. Body cracked in half like someone had stomped on it. Taped to the splintered wood was another note. Rules matter more than feelings. Lily sobbed like I'd never seen before, clutching the pieces as if she could put them back together with sheer will. My hands shook with fury. I was seconds from marching across the street when Mason shouted, "Do something, Dad. You're the police chief. Why won't you stop her?" His words sliced me open. Because he was right. What good was my badge if I couldn't even protect my own kids in my own neighborhood? But here's the question that still keeps me up at night. What do you do when following the law means leaving your family unprotected? That's the trap Karen forced me into, and she knew it. One afternoon, as I pulled into the driveway, she was already waiting on her porch, sipping iced tea, her sunglasses reflecting the sun. She waved mockingly and called out, "Chief, you really should control your daughter." Bad behavior spreads. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. I wanted to yell back, to tell her she was sick, that I had enough evidence to bury her. But I didn't, because my kids were watching from the window. And in that moment, restraint felt like the only option. Except restraint only fueled her fire. Days later, Emily found our flower beds, destroyed petals ripped, soil scattered like ash. Mason's basketball hoop was knocked over again, this time bent at the rim. And one evening, as Lily walked home from school, a car crept behind her, engine low and menacing. She came inside, shaking, swearing it was Karen's SUV. We couldn't prove it. But we knew. We always knew. And then came the confrontation. It was a Saturday, bright and deceptively calm. The kids wanted to go to the park. I hesitated, but Emily insisted they needed normalcy, needed to breathe outside our four walls. I agreed, reluctantly. We walked as a family Mason, dribbling a ball, Lily clutching her sketchbook, Emily holding my hand. For a moment, it felt normal until we saw her. Karen was standing by the park gate, clipboard in hand, as if she were inspecting playground equipment. Her eyes locked on Lily, and her lips curled into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. Going to draw ugly things again. She sneered. Lily froze, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. I stepped forward, voice low and firm. "Karen, that's enough." But she didn't stop. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the pavement, her eyes burning holes through my daughter. "Your little brat thinks she's special. She thinks rules don't apply to her." "Maybe it's time she learned," Emily gasped. Mason shoved the basketball into his arm, ready to throw it if he had to. My pulse thundered in my ears. I put my arm in front of Lily and said through clenched teeth, "You come near her again, you'll regret it." Karen tilted her head, almost amused. "Is that a threat, Chief?" Neighbors were starting to stare. Parents pulled their kids closer. Whispers rippled across the park. I could feel the weight of every eye. And Karen thrived on it. She thrived on making me look powerless. I guided my family home, my hand on Lily's shoulder, my other hand itching for my holster. Karen called after us, her voice like poison. "You can't protect them forever." That night, Lily barely ate. She sat on the couch, hugging her knees, whispering, "She hates me. She's never going to stop." I sat beside her, pulled her close, and whispered back, "I won't let her hurt you." But inside, I wondered if I was lying, because I knew Karen, and I knew this wasn't over. And I was right, because a week later, just as the sun dipped low and painted the sky blood orange, I heard a sound I'll never forget, a gun being cocked sharp. Unmistakable right outside our porch. The sound of a gun being cocked is unlike anything else. It doesn't echo like thunder, doesn't rumble like a storm. It snaps sharp, final cold and when it happens right outside your own home. It feels like the world has been split open. I rush to the porch, heart slamming against my ribs, and there she was, Karen, her face twisted with rage, her hands trembling but steady enough. And in those hands, a black pistol aimed directly at my daughter's chest. Lily froze on the steps, her sketchbook clutched against her like a shield that could never stop a bullet. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her lips quivering. She looked so small, so breakable in that moment, and I felt my soul crack apart. Emily screamed. Mason yelled. My instincts screamed louder: move, act, shield your child. But I knew one wrong motion, one twitch, and that trigger would pull itself. Karen's voice sliced through the air. You think you can ignore me? You think your brat can get away with disrespecting me? Not anymore. Tonight, she learns. Her hand shook slightly, the muzzle twitching with her rage. Sweat trickled down my temple as I raised my palms, every ounce of my training surging to the surface. Karen, I said, calm but firm. Put the gun down. She barked a laugh, high and bitter. You don't give me orders? You think your badge makes you untouchable, Chief? You think your family is better than this neighborhood? I make the rules here. The irony nearly broke me. She had no idea. She didn't realize she was pointing a weapon at the daughter of the very man who commanded every officer in this county. The same man who had enough authority to end her life of petty power plays with one phone call. But in that moment, my badge meant nothing. I wasn't the police chief. I was just a father with his daughter in the crosshairs. Please, Emily begged, stepping forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. She's just a girl. She hasn't done anything to you. Shut up. Karen shrieked, swinging the barrel slightly toward Emily before snapping it back to Lily. My wife stumbled back, choking on sobs. Mason, God bless him, took a step forward. His fists clenched, his teenage bravado surging. Leave her alone, he shouted. I threw an arm out, stopping him. Don't move, I barked, my voice sharper than I intended. His eyes widened, wet with helpless fury, but he froze. Every second stretched into eternity. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass and sweat, with fear so palpable it clung to my throat. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Somewhere behind me, a neighbor's blinds shifted as they watched from safety. But none of it mattered. All that mattered was the trembling trigger under Karen's finger. I lowered my voice, steady, commanding, but soft. Karen, listen to me. If you pull that trigger, your life is over. You know that. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, and in that flicker, I saw the madness. The way she believed she was right, that this was justice, that she was the victim. She whispered through clenched teeth, no one disrespects me. No one. My chest tightened. I knew that tone. I'd heard it in the eyes of criminals who thought the world had wronged them, who thought violence was the only way to balance the scales. Karen, I said slowly, my hand inching toward my hip, where my holster sat under my shirt. You don't want to do this, don't you? Move. She snapped, catching the shift of my arm. Her finger twitched against the trigger, and Lily whimpered, her knees buckling slightly. The sound gutted me. My daughter, my sweet, stubborn, brave girl reduced to a trembling target on our own porch. Emily's voice broke through again, raw and desperate. Please, Karen. She's 16. She's just a child. Karen's lip curled, old enough to learn consequences. The world narrowed. My vision tunneled. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears, could feel the weight of every choice pressing down on me. Do I draw my weapon and risk a shot? Do I wait, hope she falters, hope she lowers it herself? Then Lily did something that nearly shattered me. She whispered, barely audible, "Dad, it's okay. It wasn't okay. It would never be okay." But in her trembling voice, I heard her faith, her trust in me, that I would protect her, that I would save her. I tightened my jaw. My hand brushed the grip of my pistol, slow, deliberate. My voice dropped into the tone that had broken hostage standoffs, that had talked men with rifles down from rooftops. "Karen, look at me." Not at her. At me, her eyes snapped to mine, wild, unhinged, and that's when I saw my opening. My fingers curled around my weapon, my heart thundering. I could draw, I could end this. I could save my daughter, but then a noise cut through the night. A neighbor's front door creaked open. A voice shouted from across the street, "What's going on over there?" Karen flinched. Her grip jerked, and in that split second, the gun went off. The sound exploded, deafening, ripping through the evening like lightning tearing apart the sky. And Lily screamed. The gunshot shattered the night, a thunderclap that seemed to rip the air itself apart. For a moment, the world blurred, the smell of smoke, the ringing in my ears, the sound of my daughter's scream echoing over and over. My hands moved before my mind caught up. I lunged forward, wrapping Lily in my arms. Scanning frantically for blood, Emily was shrieking, Mason shouting, neighbors spilling out onto their porches. Karen stood frozen, her gun still smoking, her eyes wide with something between triumph and horror. My own weapon was in my hand now, pointed at her without hesitation. "Drop it," I roared, my voice raw, unrecognizable even to me. Karen's hand trembled, then the pistol clattered to the ground. I kicked it away, never taking my eyes off her. My training screamed for control, procedure, restraint. But my heart wanted nothing more than to end her right there. Lily whimpered against me. I pulled back and saw the red stain blooming on her shoulder. Not fatal, not center mass, but a wound nonetheless. My stomach dropped. "Emily, call 911. I barked. She was already dialing, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Mason hovered, his face pale, his fists balled, whispering, "She shot her? She actually shot her." Neighbors gasped, whispered, filmed. I didn't care. I pressed my hand against Lily's shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. My other hand still steady on my weapon. When the sirens finally wailed in the distance, I almost collapsed with relief. Patrol cars screeched into the cul-de-sac, lights flashing red and blue across every window. Officers jumped out, weapons raised only to freeze when they saw me. "Chief," one of them stammered, "secure her." I snapped, nodding toward Karen, who stood slack-jawed, her face pale but defiant. They moved quickly, cuffing her, reading her rights. She shouted, her voice cracking, "This is harassment." I was defending myself. Defending herself. Against a 16-year-old girl with a sketchbook. Paramedics rushed Lily onto a stretcher, their voices a blur through and through wound. "Stable vitals, let's move." And I climbed into the ambulance beside her. Emily held her hand, Mason trailing behind in another car. My heart didn't slow until we reached the hospital. The ER smelled of antiseptic and fear. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Doctors in green scrubs swarmed Lily, cutting away her shirt, examining the wound, ordering x-rays. Emily sobbed into my chest as we stood outside the trauma bay, listening to every beeping machine, every clipped order. Through the soft tissue, no bone damage. "Lucky shot," one doctor muttered. "Lucky?" The word rattled in my skull. Lucky that my daughter wasn't dead. Lucky that the bullet hadn't torn through her heart, her lungs. Lucky that the worst I had to hold on to was the image of her pale and trembling on that stretcher. Instead of lying lifeless in the grass, I should have felt grateful. But all I felt was rage. Hours crawled by. Nurses cleaned the wound, stitched the flesh, bandaged her shoulder. They wheeled her into a recovery room, pale but breathing, her eyelids fluttering as she whispered, "Dad?" "I'm here," I said, squeezing her hand. My voice cracked. "You're okay. You're safe." But was she? Because while Lily fought to heal, Karen was already scheming. I knew it. She wasn't the type to crumble. She was the type to twist, to spin, to lie. And sure enough, as I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed. A fellow officer had texted me. "She's claiming self-defense. Says Lily attacked her." I nearly crushed the phone in my fist. Self-defense. Against a child who hadn't even raised her voice. Against my daughter, who only wanted to draw and breathe and live. I stormed down the hall to where detectives were waiting. You need every witness statement, every video. Neighbors were outside. Cameras were rolling. Get it all. She doesn't walk away from this. They nodded, scribbling notes, but I could see the hesitation in their eyes. They knew what I knew. Karen had influence. She knew how to manipulate, how to cry victim, how to turn neighbors against each other. And if she convinced just one jury member, just one official, justice could slip away. Emily appeared beside me, her eyes swollen, her voice hoarse. "What if she gets away with this?" she whispered. "She won't," I growled. "I'll burn this county down before she does." But even as I said it, doubt gnawed at me. Back in Lily's room, Mason sat at her bedside, holding her good hand. He looked at me with eyes far older than his 14 years and said, "You always tell us the system works, Dad. You always say the law protects people. So, is it going to protect her?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because in that moment, I wasn't sure. The doctor came in, interrupting the silence. He held up a small plastic container with gloved hands. Inside was a jagged piece of metal. "The bullet. We'll send this for ballistics," he said. "But, Chief, you'll want to see this." I frowned, leaning closer. It wasn't just a bullet. It had been filed altered, tampered with. Illegal. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just negligence. It wasn't just anger. Karen hadn't fired in a moment of panic. She'd come prepared to kill. And suddenly, I realized something horrifying. If she had tampered with bullets, what else had she been hiding? I sat in the hospital waiting room, my head in my hands, the smell of antiseptic stinging my nose. Every second felt like a century. My daughter was lying behind those doors, a victim of the kind of violence I had dedicated my life to fighting. My badge weighed heavy in my pocket, a cruel reminder that I could protect an entire town. But I had failed the one person who mattered most. When the surgeon finally came out, he pulled off his mask with tired eyes. "She's stable," he said, and I nearly collapsed in relief. Stable wasn't perfect, but it meant she was still here. Still breathing. Still mine, but stable wasn't enough for me. Not anymore. I had spent years upholding the law, balancing fairness with justice, and making sure that no one abused power. But that night, as I looked through the hospital glass at my daughter's pale face and the bandage wrapped around her shoulder, something inside me shifted. My badge wasn't a shield anymore, was a weapon, and it was time to use it. The detectives on duty brought me the preliminary evidence. The neighbor's security cameras had captured Karen storming across the street with the gun in her hand. They even caught the moment she pointed it, her face twisted in rage before the flash of light burst across the frame. It was undeniable. Open and shut. Attempted murder. But here's the dilemma. Karen wasn't just a rogue neighbor anymore. She had friends, powerful ones. People in city council, people in the HOA board who had pull, people who had whispered in my ear for years, asking for favors, telling me to look the other way when it came to her. And now, with her crime caught on tape, those same people were suddenly flooding my phone, begging me to consider her mental health, her fragile state, her years of community service. They wanted me to soften the truth, to downplay it, to treat this like some unfortunate misunderstanding. But how could I? How could I erase the image of my daughter lying on the ground, her shirt soaked red, her breath ragged? That night, I went into her hospital room. The beeping machines filled the silence as I pulled up a chair beside her. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open just long enough to whisper, "Dad, don't let her win." Her voice was faint, but it lit a fire in me I couldn't put out. The next day, I walked into headquarters. The squad room went silent the second I stepped in. Everyone had heard the story by now. Half of them looked at me with pity, the other half with fear, because they knew what I was capable of when pushed too far. Detective Ramirez, my right hand, pulled me aside. "Chief, you know they're going to pressure you to bury this. The mayor already called. He's saying it's bad optics, that it could divide the community." I clenched my jaw. Bad optics. My daughter almost died, Ramirez. "I know," he said carefully. "But if you go after her full force, you'll make enemies, the kind who won't hesitate to ruin you." I looked him in the eye. "Then maybe it's time someone ruined them." That afternoon, I sat down with the DA. I slid the security footage across his desk, along with statements from neighbors, the ballistic report, and the hospital's medical files. It was airtight. No amount of favors or politics could twist this into an accident. But then the DA leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Chief, off the record. Karen's husband has been talking to council members. They want this classified as reckless endangerment, not attempted murder." My hands curled into fists. She pointed a loaded gun at a child and pulled the trigger. "How is that not attempted murder?" He gave me that bureaucratic shrug I had seen too many times in my career. "Because her friends have money and power, and they're afraid if she goes down, they go down with her." That's when I realized something. This wasn't just about Karen. It was about every single person who thought they were untouchable, who used their influence to shield monsters from justice. And I was done playing nice. Still, I couldn't ignore the weight of the moral dilemma pressing down on me. Going after Karen meant going after the system that had enabled her. And in doing so, I could bring down people I once considered allies. Good men and women who had looked the other way too many times. It meant dragging the ugly truth into the light, even if it destroyed reputations. Careers upend friendships. The easy path would have been to cave, to protect my own standing, to accept a watered-down charge and move on. But the image of my daughter's terrified face when she whispered those words "Don't let her win" burned in my mind. I met Ramirez later that night in the evidence locker. He handed me a flash drive. "This has the uncut footage. Not just the shooting, everything leading up to it. Her screaming threats, pointing the gun, all of it. If you want to go public, this is your key." I stared at the drive in my palm, the weight of the decision sinking in. If I leaked it, Karen would be finished. But so would the council members protecting her. And maybe so would my career. Ramirez looked at me hard. "I've got your back, Chief. Whatever you decide. You're not standing alone in this." That night, I sat by my daughter's bed again, the flash drive burning a hole in my pocket. I could hear the faint beeping of the heart monitor, the soft hum of the air vent, the smell of sterile bleach and bandages surrounding us. I wanted to believe in the system I had sworn to uphold. But what do you do when the system itself is corrupted? My daughter stirred again, her hand brushing against mine. She didn't open her eyes this time, but she didn't have to. I already knew the answer. I had to make a choice. Do I stay loyal to the machine, Or do I fight for the truth even if it destroys everything I've built? And that's when I whispered to myself the question that would change everything. If justice isn't for my daughter, then who is it for? The next morning, I didn't walk into City Hall as the police chief. I walked in as a father. My uniform felt heavier than ever, every polished button and every stitched badge a reminder of the burden I carried. But this time, I wasn't carrying it for the council, or for optics, or for politics. I was carrying it for my daughter. I placed the flash drive on the podium in front of the mayor. The council, the press, every set of eyes watching. "This is the truth," I said, my voice steady but burning, uncut, unedited. The truth of what happened in front of my home. The truth of what nearly killed my little girl. There were gasps when the footage played. Karen's shrill voice filled the room, her threats dripping with venom. The crowd shifted uncomfortably as they watched her wave the gun, screaming at my daughter. Then the flash the moment she pulled the trigger. Silence fell so thick it was suffocating. The mayor tried to cut the footage. "Chief, I slammed my hand down. No more excuses. No more shielding. No more protecting monsters because they sit on your boards or donate to your campaigns. Justice isn't selective. And if it is, then we don't have justice at all." For a moment, the room was frozen. And then, slowly, people began to clap. Not politicians, but the townspeople sitting in the back rows. The neighbors who had watched Karen terrorize them for years, but were too afraid to speak up. Their applause swelled until it drowned out the council's protests. By the end of the day, Karen was in custody this time without bail. Her husband resigned from the HOA, and those council members who had backed her, their connections came out in the open. Investigations were launched. The machine that had protected her was crumbling, but victory wasn't clean. It never is. Weeks later, I sat in the hospital cafeteria with my wife. Our daughter had made it through surgery and was recovering in therapy. She still woke up from nightmares, still flinched at sudden noises, still carried that scar across her shoulder like a brand. My wife looked at me with tired eyes. "Do you think we'll ever feel safe again?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about the years of my career I devoted to keeping families safe. About how fragile safety really is. How one neighbor with too much anger and too much power could shatter everything in a heartbeat. Finally, I said, "Safe. Maybe not the way we were before. But stronger? Yes. We'll be stronger," and we were. Therapy wasn't easy. My daughter cried, yelled, even blamed me at times. She said, "You were supposed to protect me, and it broke me in ways I can't describe." But then one day, months later, she said, "Dad, you did protect me. You didn't let her win." That scar on her shoulder became a reminder not of weakness, but of survival. Karen's trial made headlines. I testified, my daughter testified, and the footage left no room for doubt. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, firearm assault, endangerment. She was led away in cuffs, screaming the whole time. But nobody listened to her anymore. When the sentence was 25 years, my daughter squeezed my hand. I felt her strength. I felt mine too. But here's the truth I want you to understand. Justice doesn't heal everything. It doesn't erase the trauma. It doesn't wipe away the fear. But it does give you back your voice. It does show your children that monsters can fall. And it proves that even when the system is stacked against you, the truth can still cut through. I resigned as police chief a year later. Not because I was forced out, but because I realized my fight wasn't behind a desk anymore. I wanted to be with my family. I wanted to teach my daughter that scars don't define us, they remind us of what we survived. And every night before bed, when I lock the doors and check the windows, I don't do it out of fear. I do it as a promise. A promise that no matter what, no one will ever hurt my family again. Because at the end of the day, I'm not just a chief. I'm a father. And fathers don't let monsters win. So now I'll ask you the same question I asked myself the night my daughter lay in that hospital bed. If justice isn't for our families, then who is it for? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? And don't forget to subscribe, because I have more stories, real ones, raw ones, that the world needs to hear.